And joining me now to talk about the outcome of the two-day coal strike is the General Secretary of the AITUC, Gurudas Dasgupta, the Assistant Editor of the Business Standard, Mihir Sharma, and BJP spokesperson, Nalin Kohli. In fact, Mihir Sharma, Gurudas Dasgupta is late joining us, and it's quite possible that he's embarrassed by the outcome and doesn't want to face reality. I hope he does join us, but one can never tell. Now, the government, and this is perhaps the only thing they've conceded, has agreed to set up a committee led by a senior coal ministry official with union representatives there as part of that committee. But the main union demand of scrapping the coal ordinance provision permitting private mining without end-user restriction has not been repealed. It remains on the statute book. That being the case, is this a significant victory for the government and a significant setback for the coal unions?
I think it's an outright victory for the government, and one that I think they should be very pleased about. What they have essentially demonstrated is that not just to the coal unions, but to a lot of other public sector unions, that they currently have both the political capital and the political will to push forward with what appear to be large-scale reforms in several sectors. Now, the question is, of course, were they serious when they told the Coal India unions that there was no privatization? And it's possible that they were being a little politic there, and they are taking it one step at a time, because the coal ordinance as written definitely opens the door to a denationalization of the coal sector, which is what the unions are worrying about.
Nalin Kohli, as BJP spokesperson, are you tonight prepared to accept that Piyush Goyal, and beyond Piyush Goyal, the government as a whole, has scored a significant victory? Or do you think that will be both indiscreet and also provocative? Nalin Kohli? Nalin Kohli? I don't think we have Nalin Kohli. We have a very interesting position. Gurudas Dasgupta, the General Secretary of AITUC, who's agreed to join us. The crew is in fact waiting there for him to come, hasn't turned up. Perhaps he's embarrassed. Nalin Kohli, the BJP spokesman, who is with us and won't answer my question. Perhaps he doesn't want to claim credit. Let me then come back to you, Mihir Sharma, because we have a very interesting position here. Not only are the unions defeated in this instance, but they also seem to be divided, because Tapan Sen, the General Secretary of CITU, has said, and I'm quoting, there is no reason why the 5-day strike should have been called off in 2 days, because nothing concrete has been assured to the workers. And his boss, the president of CITU, Mr. Padmanabhan, has said CITU is not happy. Is that a clear sign that the unions themselves are split by this outcome?
I think it's that is in fact one very interesting outcome of this. So far, the various unions have been, across the public sector, have been united in opposing all forms of reform. The impression that we got in this particular strike was that the Congress-led union, which had 100,000 people, and the BJP-led union, which has about 80,000 people, tended to not be quite as hardline as the two communist unions, which together have 100,000, about 50,000 people each. And so there is in fact a sense that there was a political divide perhaps between the union movement wasn't as strong and as monolithic
and the
as they have been so far.
The corollary to what you're saying is that the Congress union sided with the BJP union, not with the two left unions.
We can't know this for certain, but this is one inference that people are drawing.
Now, Gurudas Dasgupta is there with us. Mr. Dasgupta, you're the General Secretary of AITUC. Let me ask you a straightforward, simple question. Your unions, all 5 of them, have called off a 5-day strike after just 2 days. What have you achieved, if anything at all, other than striking for 2 days?
You are not audible.
I'm not audible? Or do you not wish to answer a question that's simply embarrassing? I'm pointing out to you, Mr. Dasgupta, that the coal unions have suffered a significant defeat. The government has won a significant victory. Today, all you've done is to achieve a 2-day strike, which is 3 days less than your intended 5-day period. What have you achieved?
The strike had to be called because the government was resorting to one after another anti-worker policies and trying to dismantle the public sector, including whole India.
Mr.
Therefore, we have no other
what
option.
has that strike achieved? That's my question. What has that strike achieved? I'm putting to you, you've achieved nothing, and your main intention, which was to scrap the provision that permits private mining without end-user restriction, has not been accepted. So you've achieved nothing. You've been defeated by the government.
No. You are not right. Earlier, government did not discuss with us at all. At any level, they were going ahead with their program. Now a committee has been formed, bipartite committee, trade unions and the government. They will look into our demands and our opposition to the government's ordinance.
Can I interrupt and put this to Mr. Dasgupta? The government is letting it be known that the committee that has been formed is simply a pro forma exercise to provide you an excuse to get you off the hook. That committee does not intend to do anything. The government is saying so privately. They fobbed you off. More importantly, they stand by their commitment to permit private mining without end-user restriction.
Government does not listen to us at all. We will again go into strike. It is a step forward. We have given an opportunity to the government to discuss with us and settle. If they do not do, we have not exhausted all our weapons. We'll go into strike again.
Let me quote to you what Tapan Sen, the General Secretary of CITU, has said. This is exactly his words. There is no reason why the 5-day strike should have been called off in 2 days by the other unions, since nothing concrete has been assured to the workers. And his boss, the president of CITU, A.K. Padmanabhan, has said, and again I'm quoting, CITU is not happy. Clearly, CITU accepts and knows this is a defeat.
CITU has given its views. I am giving my views. It is not exactly necessary for me to agree with them. Majority of the unions, 4 out of the 5, have agreed and they have done what they intended to do. My friends in CITU has interpreted the situation in their own way. It has nothing to do with the reality. I differ totally with the views of CITU.
Let me bring in Nalin Kohli. Nalin Kohli, as BJP spokesperson, are you tonight prepared to accept that Piyush Goyal, the coal and power minister, and the government as a whole have scored a significant victory, and that the unions have suffered a significant defeat? Or would accepting that in public be both indiscreet and provocative?
No, I think I would put it a little differently. It, I think, only confirms that the government is working on trying to see that we can settle all the issues related to the coal sector, energy sector, and of course, as you and the media have reported, there are significant issues that need to be settled in both of these sectors. We are an energy deficient country. We have issues to coal. If we don't streamline these, then the aspirations of India, which is in manufacturing, which is in growth, which is even in electricity, they suffer.
Can I interrupt you?
Sure.
The key union demand was to repeal the element of the ordinance that permits private mining without end-user restriction. Is the government prepared, when that committee you're going to set up, to repeal this, or are you going to stand by it? The indications that have been given is that you're standing by it. There's no intention of repealing it, but let me ask you for confirmation.
Well, I can't give you that confirmation because that is the task before the committee. When a committee is formed, and that's within the government, they will look at the pros and cons and look at what's the best in interest. I think there were other issues and concerns, whether Coal India would be privatized or not, what will be the sort of disinvestment, if any. There were a lot of issues. I think we have reached a point where at one phase we used to see confrontation between management and workers, but if you don't have industry, if you do not have enough jobs, workers' rights are not met in any way. Workers' rights are in industry also being there, and they also getting a fair deal and not being exploited. And I think that can be achieved when you look at it in the larger picture, and I think that's the kind of thing which the government is working on.
We have a very interesting position here, Sharma. Gurudas Dasgupta refuses to accept the line that CITU has no problem acknowledging that this is a defeat. And that's perhaps understandable. Trade union leaders don't like to stand up in public and say, we lost this one. The government doesn't want to accept it's a victory. They keep insisting that the critical issue on which they haven't conceded is one that's still open for consideration, although the government in sotto voce terms is making it clear there's no way that clause is going to be scrapped. What do you make of the two voices you're hearing?
Well, I think that this is actually representative of how the reforms process in India normally proceeds. What happens is that the government says quietly and in Delhi drawing rooms and to investors, we are reforming this sector. Out loud it says, we are not doing anything to this sector because that will mean that some people may lose their jobs. Quietly again they'll say, we have already done this. And then out loud they'll say, we haven't done this at all because some people may lose their jobs. So there is a sense in which this entire post-1991 approach of reforming things by stealth, of a essentially duplicitous approach to reform, is continuing.
One other thing, behind the disjunction between what they do and what they say, do you believe in fact this government, at least as far as the coal sector is concerned, has advanced reform significantly?
Significantly. I think that in the coal sector they seem to have shown a certain degree of energy, possibly in solar as well, but I think Piyush Goyal has a case to make that he's one of the more energetic ministers in this government.
Let me put this to you, Mr. Das Gupta. You refuse to accept and see this as a defeat. Your colleagues CIT who are clearly saying it is a defeat, but let's leave that aside. I put something else to you. This is not just a setback in the coal sector to the trade union interest. It's a message being sent out to all other trade unions that might seek to challenge the government's economic policy and its proposed reforms. It's going to be very difficult for other unions hereafter to defy the government when you couldn't.
Not at all. This strike, which has been magnificent and perhaps the biggest ever in coal industry, it gives confidence to us when government comes down and decides to accept a committee and look into our demands. It is not a defeat. It is not going to demoralize the movement, and in the future, in the coming period, we shall go ahead with our united program to protest and oppose the government policies.
You
of
say this strike and the outcome gives you confidence. Why is CITU not sharing that confidence? Why is CITU sounding so different?
There is a difference of view.
Absolutely, that's the one I'm pointing out.
There is a difference of view.
I don't want to exaggerate.
Let them have their views. Majority of the trade unions do not accept the view of the CITU. It is their lonely voice.
All right, but the lonely voice is the voice that's recognizing the reality as I see it, that this has been a setback for the unions. The majority seem to want to defy that reality.
Rather it is a move not to see the reality.
Let me bring you in, Nalin Kohli. I don't want to exaggerate the situation, but Mrs. Thatcher's great victory was when she beat the coal miners. It was a turning point. This was the first challenge. I'm not saying it's anything similar to what Mrs. Thatcher did, but this was the first challenge to your economic reforms, and you've come up trumps.
Mr. Thapar, actually comparisons are dangerous because that was a different time, that was a different brand. I think that what I was trying to say is that, and Prime Minister Modi has said it, you need to also look at the shram sector, which is the worker sector. There's no confrontation in the approach of the government towards workers. Workers' rights, poor's rights, the marginalized rights, all of them are as important as seeing that the economy grows, industry comes up, there are jobs, there's skills. They have to walk hand in hand. The second point is what Gurudas ji was saying about the lonely voice. Actually, there is a magnificent lonely voice of the left, because that's exactly where they find their entire politics. What they
Mr.
are saying
Das Gupta is part of the left as well too.
Yes, exactly. So I'm saying it in totality of the left front. Their politics of confrontation has been targeted at shutting down industry, and I don't know how far it helps in shutting down industry when you are looking at jobs for millions of people.
Let me point one thing out. It's very interesting that at a moment of victory, you're being magnanimous and choosing to be diplomatic. Perhaps that is the right strategy, because what you want
to ensure is you minimize the conflict. It's not a victory. It's not a victory.
It's not a victory.
Step forward. It's a step forward in the interest of the country. And when you move in that direction, you can't see it in terms of victories and losses.
Very quickly, Mihir Sharma, it's not a victory, the government says, or are they being a bit duplicitous and clever?
Well, it's extraordinary, isn't it, to find a government that has a reputation for trumpeting every minor advance as a giant victory, to actually turn what is in fact a victory into, oh, it's just a step forward. And that should cause us to be extremely suspicious as to what they're actually saying.
Or perhaps recognize that perhaps the government this time is being politic because they know they've got more victories to fight. Don't make it more difficult for the days ahead. My thanks to all three of my guests
Thank
for joining me. Time for a break, but then